Thank you for joining me. Hope you're doing great. It's been quite some time since I shared my screen with you as I do some post-processing, and I thought now would be a good time since some of my workflow has changed. Today I'm going to do a quick edit on this little Ruby-crowned Kinglet that I photographed a couple of years ago and show you how I bring out the eye. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to jump into the develop mode in Lightroom. And the first thing I always do is reframe and recrop just to make sure that things are level and it's composed the way I want to. And so I am going to go into the crop tool here. And one quick tip in the crop mode, if you want to go from from landscape orientation to portrait orientation, there's two ways of doing it. Either you can eyeball it and hope you get it somewhat right with the proportions. You can do that, just kind of eyeball it. Or a really quick and easy way to do this is when you've already clicked on your crop tool, just hit the X key on your keyboard and that will automatically change your crop to portrait orientation. I know for me that was super helpful, and I think it will be for you as well. So let's jump into this edit. Cute little Ruby-crowned Kinglet. They're a tough bird to photograph. They are super fast and super tiny. They don't sit still for long, so I was really happy with this shot. There was some other photos from this session that I edited, and I never got around to editing this one, so I thought this was a good one. I'll go ahead and finish that edit. I'm going to go into exposure. I shot this one a little underexposed, so that's not a problem. I'm just going to go ahead and boost that exposure a bit, something like that. Increase the contrast. I'm going to warm this up just a touch, something like that maybe. I want to pop this red out a bit, something like that maybe. I'm going to take the shadows. I don't want quite as many harsh shadows there, so something like that looks good. The light wasn't super harsh, but still I want to kind of just soften those shadows a bit. And now I'm going to create my own kind of vignette here. I'm going to take this corner down here. You can see that when I do this graduated filter here, my exposure on it is already jacked up. It's because I did something. But if you just double click on exposure right there, it'll bring it back to 0. So I'm going to take the exposure down on this one. I want to just darken down that corner a bit. Like I said, I'm creating kind of a vignette on here. Double click that, bring it back to 0, and just darken that down just a little bit. Almost kind of like I've got a little spotlight here. I'm going to go ahead and boost the vibrance just a touch. And that looks pretty good. I got these two little buds that are just, this was springtime, early spring, so the buds were just starting to pop out, and these are going to turn into these beautiful leaves, and it's such a great time. So that's when these little birds are one of the first birds to show up here in Alaska in the springtime, and it's always great when I hear them in the forest. So from here, this is good to hop over and edit in Photoshop, and we're going to finish it up there. Previously, I would open this up in Topaz Studio, where I would take it through their AI Clear program, which reduces noise, and then I would open it up into Photoshop from there. But I am going to show you what I do now, which is still working with Topaz Labs, but I actually discovered that Topaz Sharpen AI does a really good job of reducing noise and bringing out the details. And this out of focus mode that they've got here, this middle one, where it says very noisy, I just let this thing run through, and it reduces noise here in the background, and it kind of sharpens up some of these details a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. But it works really well. It works just as good or better than what I was doing before with the AI clear, and then you know, I would put a layer of sharpening on top of that, but now I just do it all with this AI sharpen. So I'm really happy with that. And this bird really doesn't need much. I am going to, I think, do a curves adjustment layer. I want to darken down that bottom just a touch more. Alright, so I've got that, and I'm going to hit Command I and invert that. Grab my brush here, make sure that that's, use my right bracket here. Something like that. Reduce the opacity a bit. There we go. I think that works. I'm going to bring the opacity of that down just a bit. 65. Yeah, that feels better. Okay, so what I really wanted to do and what I wanted to show you is how I tackle the eye. Bringing out the eye in your wildlife photos is super, super important. The eye is the window to the soul, that's what they say, and giving life to your creatures is really, really critical when you're doing this. So too often I see black holes for eyes in various wildlife photos that people share, and it doesn't really take a lot of effort to bring out some of the life in their eye and the character. So I got some good catch light here in this eye. I'm just gonna grab my my dodge tool here, and it's set to, the range is set to midtones, and I'm just gonna lightly kind of hit some of the edge there. It's already got a bright spot right there in the middle where the sun was. It was kind of a partially cloudy day, so it wasn't like direct sun, but enough to have a little bright spot there. But I just want to kind of lighten up that little area right there. But I'm not done yet, so I've got the catch light in there, but I also want to bring out some of the color. Now really subtly you can see that there was some color here in the eye. And if you look at the structure of an eye, you have the round part here, but if you take off this clear layer, you would have the iris and the pupil, and that's actually more like an inverted plate right there. It kind of bends in. So the light that's coming from this direction here, if you can see my little mouse selection tool, maybe I'll switch here. The light's coming from this direction, and it's hitting this part of the eye, but then it's going to be lighting up the part of the eye that's down here, and that's the part where you're going to see the color in the bird's eye. So I'm going to take my dodge tool and I'm going to change it to shadows, because I want to bring out the shadowy, the darker part. And I'm just going to hit this a couple of times. 1, 2, and I'm already starting to bring out that color. And I don't want to go any more with the shadows, because if I switch to midtones now, I can actually start bringing out the brown and the more of the color. So I'm just going to hit this a couple of times and bring out the color in the eye. And you may be asking yourself, why is he doing this in a destructive way versus a non-destructive way? And the answer to that is, this photo is probably not winning any awards, and I'm not going to print it or publish it likely. So with that said, this is most likely going to be shared on like Instagram or Facebook, things like that, and so I'm not really worried about going back and having to redo it or anything like that. So pretty much got my technique down for these, and there's always Command Z, so all is not lost. Or I could just bring up the original edit or the original file and do it again if I have to. It's a pretty clean file. There's not a ton to do here, so that is my reasoning for that. So if I zoom out here, you can see that I really have brought out so much character in this little bird than before. And if we go back and we look at this from the opening, you can see all the noise here. You can see there's not as much life and character in the eye. And then when I fast forward, boom, so much life and character. I love it. And you can do this technique with any animal, really. You can just go in there and dodge in there in some of those areas and bring out some of the character and the color in those eyes and really make them pop. You really grab people when you can bring out those eyes and connect. You know, you got that really good connection to the wildlife, and yeah, eyes are it, guys. So there you have it. That is just about finished. I'm going to go ahead and throw my little signature on there so people know that this is mine. I'll place that there, and what I'm doing is I'm placing an Adobe Illustrator vector file in there, and this is just in my library. And if you have an Adobe Creative Cloud account, you can have a little library of your own where you can just drag and drop your stuff. Whatever you have. If you've got colors that you like, if you've got signatures or any kind of watermarks or anything like that, you can drop those right from your library right onto your photos every time, so it's super handy. The editing mode on this is going to be color dodge. So I'm going to hit this particular layer with this blending mode, color dodge, because I want it to kind of blend into the background. I still want people to know it's mine, but yeah, looking nice right there in the green. And then I'm just going to go ahead and save this little guy to my files. I'm going to change this to a Photoshop file. Just call it Ruby-crowned Kinglet. Looks good to me. So now I need to make a file that I can share on Instagram and on Facebook. So I'm just going to go to image size here. All of my portrait orientations I make 12 wide, and then I drop the resolution down to 180. You can still see the details, but it's really not good for a print. Doesn't make for a very nice print set, 180 resolution. Go here to save a copy. Select JPEG. I'm just going to erase that copy in the file name. Enter, and I'm good. And then I'm going to don't save. I am not going to save this again because I've reduced the file size, and so I don't want to resave it because I will lose the higher quality file if I just save this. So don't save it. So that's it, guys. That is all I have for you today. If you haven't done so yet, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. Thanks as always. We'll see you next time.